We had always loved old brick houses and happened to find one in a small Dutch settlement called Hoosik. The house was built around 1810 and gave us all the space we needed for a growing family. An added bonus were the beautiful grounds and ponds surrounding the house. The interiors of the house were intriguing and old world and became the inspiration for future paintings. There was a carriage house that connected at the back, and I converted it to a studio with a large north window and a high ceiling. That Vermeer light, that's what I should call it. When I have an idea for a new painting, I start with the model and my sketchbook. After I get a general idea, I sketch it right on the canvas. I use soft charcoal so that I can remove mistakes easily, and then when I feel like I'm ready for the next stage, I wipe all the charcoal away, leaving only a ghost image. I like to paint using natural daylight. I have a wooden palette for my colors. It's the old-fashioned handheld type. I use 16 colors that allow me to mix almost everything. The next step is to start what I call the underpainting. This is the first painting stage, and I work only in umber and white. It gives me a chance to study the drawing and tones of the model. I was a typical child of a post-Korean War southern town, or at least I thought I was. Summers were spent barefoot running through the woods and at the Racket Club swimming pool. By the end of the summer, our eyes were swollen and red from the chlorine, and our skin dark brown and covered in chigger bites. My father was born in Chicago, where his father was a plant manager for Kraft Foods. My mother was born in Memphis. Her father was an early vaudeville and radio entertainer there. My parents met at the University of Alabama. They were young and full of life in the era of modern jazz and Unitarianism. My mother gave birth to my brother when she was 19. I came along 2 years later. In the early years, my father started a garbage pickup company and sold insurance. He was also very involved in pioneering the early days of the Southern Republican Party. My mother designed the home where I spent most of my childhood. It was modern and quite unlike anything else in town. I always felt special living there because we were the only house in the neighborhood with a doorknob in the middle of an orange front door. I remember at nights she would help me copy pictures from comic books. Those were my first art lessons. I've always believed that my art talent came from my mother and my stubborn drive from my father. As time passed and the family grew to 6 children, complications with my parents' relationship developed and took their toll. The marriage disintegrated soon after. In time, they would both remarry. My father married a woman whose devotion to us gave a sense of stability to the family. They've been married for nearly 50 years. Once I feel like the umber stage is complete, I move to color. I always start the color with the model's face. I hold my palette and brushes in my left hand and feel it's the best way to maneuver yourself through a painting. Because no matter where I am in the room, I have everything right with me. When I work life size, I use a technique called sight size, where I place the object I'm painting and my canvas in the same light. All my painting decisions are made from 5 to 8 feet away, and when I get the right mixture on the brush, I pace in and put down a stroke or two. I get a lot of walking done in a day of painting. Working with live models is the most challenging and rewarding part of painting. It's a chance to really test my skills, because now I'm dealing with another living person. Light conversation is also fun and helps to pass the many hours we'll spend together. But chocolate helps too. No. These are, what'd you call them?
Non-Perels.
Non-Perels. Is that what these are called?
I know because I have to work with them.
Oh, that's right. You work in a confectionery store. I forgot about that. No. Move your elbow, your arm around that way. The right look is not the only part of a successful model. Personality plays a huge role. We have to feel comfortable to work together. When I reach the point where I feel the model is 99% completed, we stop with the live sessions for a while. I became enamored with elegant textiles from my early days of looking and copying the paintings of the old masters. My appreciation grew as I studied the 19th and 20th century paintings of John Singer Sargent and Robert Henright. My favorite to paint are the traditional Japanese wedding kimonos. They are full of colorful designs with cranes or peacocks everywhere. It would be silly and unrealistic to paint the kimono with the model wearing it every day, because each time she posed, the folds would be different and it would be impossible to accurately paint it. For centuries, artists have used life-size mannequins for this, and I do the same. About a month before I finish a painting, I pay a visit to my favorite framer, Guido Studios in Boston. Choosing the right frame for a particular painting is an art in itself. For textures, I'm going with an early 20th century frame style designed by the New York architect Stanford White. The framing process is a laborious and fascinating one. The technique used has its roots going back hundreds of years. The gold leafing process is my favorite part. Each leaf of 23 karat gold has to be handled using the static electricity from one's body and lifted and applied with a brush. The gold is so thin and fragile that if you tried to pick it up with your fingers, it would break into 100 pieces. I usually start painting the kimono somewhere near the face or body of the model. I try to take a small segment of the kimono and work on that for the entire day. Using the natural north light is crucial for the effect of the painting. The kimono is painted in segments. I try to finish a small section every day so there's a freshness to the paint quality. When I paint flowers, for example, I paint only one a day. This method makes it nearly impossible to have a whole flower arrangement at one time. When planning to do the painting textures, I was struck with how light fell on the different objects. For example, the softness of Anna's skin contrasted with the dark, rich tones of the kimono, and the silky quality of her hair transitioning from her head to her face. The neutral background is a unifying tone that accentuates and ties together the richness of the colors and textures. In 1973, while I was attending the Maryland Institute College of Art, I met the artist Joseph Shepard, who was teaching a class in oil painting. He was carrying on a tradition of painting that had its roots going back several hundred years. Shepard had his students looking and copying from the old masters. My favorite was the 17th century Flemish painter Anthony van Dyck. As I copied his portraits in the museums, I started to understand how to paint skin. My studies of Van Dyck helped to lay the foundation for my own style. In 1978, I received a grant to study in Florence, Italy. While there, I was able to broaden my horizons by painting the Tuscan countryside. I absorbed the Florentine culture as if it were my own. I had a small motorcycle which enabled me to travel and paint the surrounding hilltop towns near Florence. I literally became an Italian for the next 3 years. Several years later, I moved to New York City and began my portrait career. After 5 years, I longed for the upstate New York countryside, and in 1986, my wife and I packed all our belongings, including our 5-week-old baby, and left in a Ryder truck for a new life. For the next 7 years, we rented a beautiful farm on the banks of the Battenkill River. I built a studio, and we added a second son to the family, and life was good. At last I felt I had a more solid foundation to my life. Anita and the boys gave me a sense of responsibility and direction that I had not felt before. Also, it gave me a clearer purpose in my art. I painted the sunflowers in the summer, the fields in the fall, and interiors in the winter. Sometimes I even found myself painting in the river. The farmhouse was white clapboard, drafty in the winter and hot in the summer. But it was a perfect place to raise 2 young boys. One morning I started sketching scenes of mother and baby in bed. This became the inspiration for my painting entitled Anita and Elliot. I think of this painting as a tribute to my wife and children, who gave me so much in life and mostly an inspiration to paint. I generally use a set number of 16 colors which allow me to paint nearly everything. Occasionally, when painting kimonos, I use more intense greens and blues. As the kimono nears completion, I have the model come back for a few last poses. Slight adjustments can be made at this time to tie everything together. I learned early on in Shepard's classroom that painting is a daunting task, which requires a thorough understanding of drawing, color, tonality, and composition. Oil paint should always look fresh and wet. My way of achieving this is to work on one section at a time and try to finish that section in one sitting. The day has finally arrived when I'm ready to deliver the painting to Quidley Gallery in Boston. It's about a 3-hour road trip, so I have to make sure everything is in order and the painting dried and varnished. After I load the painting in the car, we're on our way. As we arrive in Boston, the gallery has been alerted and is waiting for our arrival. The painting is carefully removed and transported to the gallery. The final step is to install the painting into the frame. Any clumsiness or accidents at this point might mean a trip back home to the studio. In addition to the frame, I had a gold leaf hand-lettered nameplate made just for the painting. It will be attached by 2 small brads at the bottom portion of the frame. The painting is fitted and looks great. Now starts the reward of seeing the final product hanging in the gallery, ready to be seen. The director, Chris Quidley, gets on the phone and immediately starts to contact collectors. This part of the process is always different. He could find a buyer right away, or it could take months or longer. As I sit in the gallery looking at my latest painting, it's hard for me to remember all the many hours it took to get it here. The hardest part is having to say goodbye to it. Soon I'll be on the next painting, and it will have its own set of problems and challenges. But I do love it. I love everything about it.